Well, hello, everyone. We have a very special guest, Callum from Titans TV. Welcome, Callum.
Thank you very much, Mel, for having me. It's been a long time coming. I've been
Yeah,
enjoying watching your channel for some years now. It's been very inspirational. Dr. J. Smith on Pafanda Films, as well as on CIRA with Fadi. So I've been enjoying your channel a lot and the content that you've been putting out.
I'm I'm a bit of a fanboy of Titan TV. I used to watch it a number of years ago, and only because I'm working on the channel so much, it's so hard to get to keep up with all the latest stuff you're doing. So I'm hugely honored to have you on the channel. So thank you very much. You reached out to me, I think it was yesterday, with an interesting angle on the historical Muhammad. So I'm going to be learning about this in real time. Don't know what's coming up. I have some little hints of what might be coming up, but I'm going to be watching what you have to offer at the same time as the audience. So it's over to you, really.
Definitely. Thank you. Okay. Today is a long time coming to actually do this presentation on your channel. Again, you literally, we had this conversation yesterday, and it was just like a shock. Okay, cool. Tomorrow, let's do this presentation. So I said, okay, quickly, let me put something together real quickly that your audience will be able to gravitate towards. And it's simple enough and just concise enough to get the point across. And hopefully, I'm hoping that you would invite me back on again so we can follow up with other editions of this particular presentation
Absolutely.
with extra
Yeah.
information crammed in as well.
Excellent.
And today's presentation, of course, is called The Historical Muhammad, Rediscovering the Abyssinian Origins of Islam. Okay. And
Excellent.
I know that's going to sound controversial to a lot of people, but I've seen it so much so far that everywhere we're talking about the Byzantine connection with Islam, the Sassanid connection with Islam or origins of Islam. And I'm always wondering, why is nobody talking about the Abyssinian or the Axumite origins of
Yeah.
Islam?
You
Considering
know,
that the,
I was
go
about
ahead.
to say that I don't know if you're aware of a guy called Lloyd Young. He's the only
Mhm.
other person that I hear talking about this connection. So
Yes.
I'm sure he will be delighted to hear what you've got to say.
At the same time, I've heard you do a presentation. I believe it was on Maida, the Ethiopian Ga'iz connection with the word Maida, chapter 5 of the Quran. And I believe that you made a
Yeah.
few connections to do with the homilies as well. So I was pleasantly
Yeah.
surprised
Yeah.
when you, yeah.
Yeah. There's
So
definitely
yeah.
some there. But, well, I'd love to do more of a deep dive into this angle. Um,
Mhm.
but it's very hard to cover everything. So this is where your contribution will make a huge leap for us. So
Definitely,
yeah,
definitely. I thought it was just, apt for me to actually focus more on the Abyssinian and the African connection to do with Islam. I'm always looking at, I'm like, okay, hold on. The only supposed king that converted to Islam during the time of, Islam, it wasn't the Persians, it wasn't the Byzantines. Supposedly, they never went to war with the Ethiopians. Why is that? What is the connection? And then we read again in Irfan Shahid's book as well that the only language that we know that Muhammad spoke outside of Arabic is as well the Ethiopic or the Ga'iz language. So there's so much connections to do with Ethiopia, Abyssinia, and so forth, but nobody is giving much thought to it. And recently, we have seen more interest in it as well, which I shall be bringing up later on in the presentation as well. So I can't wait to do this presentation, and we're going to be rediscovering the Abyssinian origins of Islam together. And let's go. So, um, I've got a nice comical picture up. I'm not too sure if you can see it all, but right there, I asked the question. Hold on. I asked the question basically, what does Prophet Muhammad and Santa Claus have in common? Well, apart from both being legendary figures that flew into heaven with magical beasts, apart from that connection, what else do they have? Well, as I said before, they are legends, but they are legends that was birthed out of historical figures.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Santa Claus was birthed out of the 4th century Christian bishop from Byzantine Empire, Anatolia specifically, Saint Nicholas. He was birthed out of those traditions that kind of merged and morphed with other traditions of Father Christmas, etc. And there's a whole, commercialization with inside of American culture, creating the whole red and white and so forth for the selling of Coca-Cola in the 20th century as well. Okay. But our Muhammad, or Prophet Muhammad, he too was a historical figure, birthed out of the 6th century from a Christian bishop from Abyssinia by the same name, also Muhammad. And this is something that I see nobody talking about. And hopefully from today onwards, other people will do some more research on this particular Muhammad. And then we can actually have much more fruitful dialogue of how did Islam actually start, right? And it is my proposition, my thesis, that it was from this 6th century Muhammad that the stories later got corrupted. It got certain stories, got changed, omitted, and fabricated into creating the mythical, legendary figure of Islam that has no historical basis, and that is the Muhammad of Islam that everybody knows about.
So this is the bit I heard from you yesterday, and I was like, yes, I have to get you on. When can we get you on? So yeah, I'm really intrigued. I'm dying to hear what you got to say.
Perfect. So before I even go into the presentation, though, I like to do this on my channel.
Yes.
And I usually start off by saying this. Let me tell you a story of a man in the 6th century who was destined to be a prophet of the Arabian Peninsula. He was a preacher who preached his message throughout Mecca to those who would listen, but gloom and doom was upon him. For he was cast out by his tribe. But fortunately, he was able to convince his followers to immigrate to Abyssinia, where he fostered a wonderful relationship with his Ethiopian king. As he grew in power and status, he was appointed military leader. He would regularly do dawah to persuade the Arabs to make pilgrimage to the Kaaba. But the people turned against him, which finally led him to make an expedition against them in Mecca. His hope from start to finish was to convert the people to his new religion. And if I was to ask your audience, who was this individual? We would all say resoundingly, Muhammad. And if I asked you, and what was this new religion? Everybody would say resoundingly yet again, Islam. And then unfortunately, I would have to say to you, indeed, his name was Muhammad. But no, his religion was not Islam. It was a new form of Christianity that was introduced to the Arabian Peninsula. And it seems as though scholars of today are starting to come to grips with this, starting to touch this new religion, and they're starting to call it Paleo-Islam or Proto-Islam. Okay,
And this the first thing that jumps out at me, just as a thesis, is you've answered one of the key things, which is how would a group of Christians be willing to follow someone unless they had some authority? So a bishop would fit the bill very nicely. So that's my just initial reaction to it. I've never heard this before. It's really incredible.
Indeed. And to be honest with you, I got this information from reading this book right here. I don't know if everybody else has got this book, but I would say it is a foundational read into figuring out who this historical Muhammad was. It's the first, no, it's not the first actually, but it's the one that has come down to us throughout the annals of history. And this is the Sirah Rasulullah by Ibn Ishaq. And this is the edited or edition of Alfred Gulam. And I know you know this book.
Yeah.
Right? The Life of Prophet Muhammad. So in there, okay, we find out about the life of Prophet Muhammad, his mission and so forth, when you hit page 104. But before you get to page 104, and you're reading, turn to page 22. I just encourage my readers, those of the audience now, to just turn to page 22. And this is where we're introduced to our Muhammad, this Abyssinian Muhammad who was a bishop. Okay. And in there, on page 22, and later on onto page 23 also, we read in the green. I don't know. Is it showing up?
I can see it, yeah.
Cool. We read, with Abraha. Abraha, again, was a Abyssinian king who ruled, I'm going to show you later on, he ruled the whole of Arabia, right? And this is something that, I don't know why, nobody knows this, okay? But he ruled the whole of Arabia. With Abraha, there were some Arabs who'd come to seek his bounty. Among them, Muhammad ibn Khuzai, names the rest of, his tribal affiliations, with a number of his tribesmen, including a brother of his called Kays. While they were with him, a feast of Abraha occurred, and he sent to invite them to the feast. I'm just going to skip down a little bit because it has a nice little story about the festival that was taking place, the meats that was being offered, and so forth. Then he crowned, the bit where it has green at the bottom, then he crowned Muhammad and made him Amir of Mudar and ordered him to go among the people to invite them to pilgrimage at his cathedral, which he had built. For me, that there was a sticking point. That there, when I was reading this, I was like, huh? This doesn't make sense to me. Because a little bit around this story, we find out about an elephant called Mahmud. Why is there an elephant? We're being introduced, every time we're being introduced to this name Muhammad, it's coming from South Arabia. It's coming from these Ethiopians that were, conquering Arabia. We find an elephant called Mahmud. We find another prophet called Muhammad that's been mentioned. If you go into Ibn Sa'd's Tabakat, it tells you that he was associated with prophethood as well, and he had a new religion, and he was with Abraha in Yemen with his new religion. So we find this story, and it's like, huh? What? So you're telling me that there was already a person called Muhammad who was already a prophet in Arabia that conquered the whole of Arabia, and then Muhammad was supposedly born in the year of the elephant in this year and was named after the conquering party who was supposedly against. It's like, huh? This doesn't make any sense. It's like, is this a foreshadowing? Okay, because they conquered Arabia without actually having to battle. Conquered Mecca without actually having to battle Mecca, have a battle in Mecca. That's the story. But then we have the same story of Muhammad later on that conquered Mecca, actually having to have a battle as well and brought a new religion. I was like, huh? Is this a foreshadowing? I don't get it. So that's what actually started me on my journey to actually look into this particular individual. And whoo, what an exciting journey it has been to actually find out more about this individual right here. I don't know. Did you have any questions before I continue?
Well, it's just that there are a number of inscriptions to do with Abraha, where it talks about God and his Masih, God and his Messiah, followed by Abraha. Now, I was thinking, is it calling Abraha the Messiah, or is it just simply a formula to do with God? But it's interesting that particular formula was cropping up a lot. And then at the same time, you have the Jews proclaiming a Mahmed. So it talks about the Lord of the Jews and his Mahmed. So you have this parallel going on where both Christians and Jews are referring to a Messiah figure. So this is interesting. Yeah. This is all new to me, what you're sharing there.
Definitely. And we see as well, other authors have actually picked this up as well. So we see that Carlos Segovia in his Quranic Jesus, he picks it up as well. And he says that, hold on, this verbiage that's being utilized, i.e. The Rahman or God and his Messiah, we also find that within inside of the Quran, which is quite interesting. There was like, we also see that during Abraha's time, he brought in a few changes within inside of the language as well. And we see that he brings in certain things as the Ruh Quds, where before it was utilizing the more Geezy term of Manef Kudus, I believe it was, which is to do with the Holy Spirit. And we see that the same change that Abraha and his inscriptions and whoever his religious head was brought forth, we find the same verbiage within inside of the Quran. We see that even with the naming of Muhammad as well. Actually, I think I'll go to the naming of Muhammad a little bit later on because that's quite interesting as well. Because we can see the first
Yeah,
time
yeah,
we see the inscriptions of a term Mahmed or Muhammad being utilized, we in the Sabaic writings, and then all of a
yeah,
sudden, these same Sabaic people or the Sabaic, people who have the Sabaic writings, they also introduce a new Muhammad into the equation. So very interesting. But I'm going to hold that for another section. But
okay,
yeah, we'll go into that. So right here, I just wanted to point out a few things, okay? And this has stumped Muslim commentators for quite some time. It says here that he crowned Muhammad, okay? And right here, I'm just going to let you know that there is two offices being mentioned here. There is a crowned office, and some Muslims have put forward the idea that this was to do with him being a king. And then others put forward the hypothesis that it's to do with him being a commander, a military leader, therefore he was crowned. And I'm going to say it's got nothing to do with any of that. It is to do with a religious crown. And we'll touch on that religious crown in a little while. And the second office that he was given, he was made Amir of Mudar. Amir of Mudar is like a prince of Mudar or a master of Mudar. And for those who know, which we'll go into a little bit later on, Mudar is just another word, another name being utilized for an Arabian tribe of Ma'ad. So he was given two offices. He was given a religious office and he was given a political office. When we dig deeper down, we realize what this religious office was. And it's all linked to the word cathedral. Abraha had built a cathedral. For those of us who come from Christianity, or those of us who come from Orthodoxy or Catholicism, we understand that a cathedral is completely different to every other church. A cathedral houses a cathedra. A cathedra is a throne. That throne is the see, or the see of a bishop. And that is what's going on. If we go back further on, we'll understand for the last 25 years, there was no bishop within inside of South Arabia, within inside of the Himyarite kingdom after Caleb. Caleb had introduced earlier on he consecrated a church, he built a church and so forth, and he had a bishop that was enthroned there, but that bishop died, and unfortunately, the Chalcedonian Creed came in, and they were Miaphysites. They did not want to accept a Chalcedonian, so that see will remain vacant for over 25 years. We find that written in, I will bring it up later on for you guys. But if you understand the context, that this was like a monumental occasion that was taking place where finally a bishop was actually consecrated and enthroned. It's a big thing. And we'll find out about this big thing by, guess what? We have it corroborated, not only from Islamic records, but we find it. We find it in CIH 541, which is the Marib Dam inscriptions of Abraha. And in there, we find some very interesting information that I don't think anybody in the scholarly community as of yet has gone in and done a proper deep dive into this. Okay. So I'm just going to do a quick outline of it. And then later on, if there is more time, we'll actually go in depth and actually read out the inscriptions. The inscriptions really start from 63, 64, line 63 or 64 on the Marib Dam, and it goes down to roughly around 67. And all the information that you need to know is basically in that. And in there, I'm just going to give you the parallel list. So on the right-hand side, you should be able to see the parallel list of and the Marib Dam inscription of Abraha. We see that there is a summoning of the Arabs. We see that he sent in the Siram, he sent to invite them to feast. And then Marib Dam having sent out the summons to the Arabs, there was a festival of Abraha, there was a celebration of Mass. there was an ordination, i.e., there was a crowning of Muhammad and an ordering him to do certain things. We see that there was a consecration of the archpriest. We see that there was a cathedral, and then there, of course, is the cathedral of the Marib. We see that the celebrant inside of the Syriac literature is Muhammad. But with inside of the Marib Dam inscription, we see a certain term being used, a certain word being used, which is Kasim Ab. And if you know anything about the uh, the Sabaic language, the ejective is put at the end, just like when you see Rahmanan, you see Rahman, and then the an at the end or the n at the end is the definite article meaning the Rahman.
Okay.
And when you transcribe it into the Arabic language, it becomes Al Rahman. And it's the same thing that's taking place here. Kasim Ab
Yeah.
becomes Abu Kasim.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay. That's interesting. Just a comment before you continue. You were talking about the idea of this person Muhammad being crowned, etc. And I was thinking of the three roles of a Messiah, which is priest, prophet, and king. And it seemed like all of this was pointing to that idea of him being considered like a Messiah. You know?
Yeah, that is very, very interesting because he was a priest, he was a prophet, and in some sense, he was a leader or a king. So, a leader
Yeah.
of a group of people, a tribal group of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, this is, yeah, that ties in sweetly. So, yeah,
Yeah.
this Marib Dam inscription is basically one of the most, it's 250. Let me just put it back. It's on the left hand side of it's 250 meters high. It's very beautiful to look at. If you can read the inscriptions, it's very good to look at. And in there, it lets you know that it was basically erected for three main reasons. First, to do with the expedition that took place, is to do with the consecration of that church, and of course the dam that was rebuilt or patched up again. And we see that there was a lot of resources that was spent on those three things. So this consecration of the church was a major event. You see here, the amount of livestock was and animals and cows that was butchered and so forth for this. It was
Wow.
a like one of the biggest tasks. And and this is crazy because we actually see that the Arabs or the Muslim scholars or historians pick up on this story and actually put it inside of the Syriac literature to do with their prophet Muhammad.
So it does feel like this bit here has got a historic core. I would have written off a lot of this material as completely fictional, but I think I think you're making a very good case for this having a historic basis. So this it's fascinating. It's just about understanding it correctly, getting the right interpretation of what is meant in the Sirah. So excellent.
That's it. That's it. And I'm gonna just push on a little bit. Okay. So, and I wanted to bring this up as well because this is like another incident where, how can I put it? We have the Syria report and certain things. And, personally, I'm like, nah, the Syria literature is doubtful. I think me and you may both hold that. It's a bit doubtful. But when it's speaking about, individuals outside of it, I'm like, okay, cool. Abraha,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, cool. We have inscriptions. We know that he is a real person that existed. Okay. So you might have some historical information in there. Cool. And then, you've made mention of, this particular individual that was crowned, that we know that there was a bishop that was ordained during that time. It was a massive thing, and it was actually a big upheaval. And I haven't brought this out yet because I just want to get this information across. But we will do a deeper dive, and you will see that it was a massive thing that took place. This particular bishop that was ordained during that time caused a great split within inside of the Ethiopian kingdom. Okay. Um, but then we see again that there is a cross-referencing taking place within inside of that Syriac literature to do with Muhammad, and we find it to do with his brother called Kays. Okay, and that Kays is picked up in Precipius, or sorry, Procopius. Sorry, and this is Sydney Smith. Sorry, I didn't get to do um, the references on this, but I will
Sure.
definitely, put the references at the end in your video in the description box of everything that's there. And if you want anything from me, all you have to do is email me, Kalam at live.co.uk, and I'll send you all the references and all the PDFs that you need. Okay. It says here, at one point of the narrative of Ibn Ishaq can be connected with other sources. He states that when Abraha was imposing Christianity on the northern Arabs, he appointed Muhammad ibn Khuzar, emir of Mudar, and adds incidentally that Qais, who went with his brother to the territory of Kinana, fled to Abraha when Muhammad was murdered. According to Procopius, this Qais, a prince of Ma'ad, had to flee from Sumayyafa. Justinian requested that king to restore Qais at the same time that he asked for an invasion of the Persian territory. He would renew that request to Abraha. The father of Nunusu twice went to Qais before he became a fugitive in Himyar. That is before 530. I'm butchering this name because I always used to call him Nunus, but now I'm seeing his name is like Nunusus himself went to Qais when he ruled some northern region. He must then have been restored. Later, Qais sent his son Muawiyah to Justinian, then gave his emirate to his brother and followed his son. Justinian made him Phylak of Palestine. The Arab source show that throughout Qais was in friendly relations with Abraha. It's going to get interesting. Okay, Amir. So he skips a few pages, like 3 pages down, and he kind of rounds it up. It says here, once Ma'ad was subject to Abraha, it is probable that he would install the former emir, Qais ibn Khuzai, on whom he could rely. It is equally probable that he appointed Muhammad ibn Khuzai to impose Christianity in the Mecca region, since Qais could support him from his adjoining territory. The evidence interlocks through though from quite unconnected sources. So, usually someone asks me, yeah, okay, you're bringing this up, but what other scholars are saying what you're saying? And I'm like, okay, Sidney Smith, writing about the 6th century, this is what happened. He says, roughly what I'm saying. Yeah. So I'm like, this is beautiful because we see that the Mudar talk is being related to, they're also saying that this Mudar is Ma'ad. And we're seeing that, there was a vacuum there, and that Abraha is quite likely he did actually appoint Muhammad ibn Khuzar to be the head of Ma'ad and to impose Christianity in the Meccan region as well. Yeah. So it's quite interesting to see that we can find it from the Sirah. We can find it in the inscriptions.
This is a really spooky parallel to the story that's meant to have happened in the 7th century in relation to Muhammad. It's as you say, it's a foreshadowing, but except in miraculous circumstances, it's usually just a story that's retold with a few changes, which I've noticed.
See, I'm trying to keep it simple. Yeah. I'm trying to keep it simple today because if you see the parallel list that I've got up, okay, yeah. My other thesis to this is that this Muhammad is one and the same. I say they're both the same Muhammad. It's just because what's it called? Ibn Ishaq makes a little mistake and throws off the chronology. That's why we're a bit confused today. If that was not made, because he was the first one to introduce that Muhammad was born in the year of the elephant. So it throws off the chronology. So we now believe that Muhammad is, later than this Muhammad. But I'll leave that now because I don't want to confuse the audience. So I'm trying to keep it simple.
But actually, the difficulty then also is the fact that Ibn Ishaq is writing about this other Muhammad, the earlier one, much later. Yes. So it's like, I don't know, 250 to 300 years. I'm just trying to do it in my head.
Yep.
So if he's, say, writing in the 750s and this is the 550s, 200 years. So it's a long period. And a lot can happen in the meantime as well in terms of things getting twisted and so on. So, this is a very interesting line of inquiry.
And then I thought that you would enjoy this. I threw this into the mix, especially for you. Okay. because I know you did a few things on Ibn Kabisar and so forth. And I
Yeah,
thought this is a good one. This is my take on it. I'm not putting it out there as this is definitive. I think there's still more work to be done on it. But I thought to myself, this is a curious case. Let me bring it up to you. So, the curious case of Ibn Kabsha, right? In the Maghazi of Mamar, by the translation is by Sean Anthony. He basically gives us this information here. It says here Ibn Abi Kabsha, meaning descendant of Abu Kabsha. This was a derisive nickname for Muhammad, the original significance of which is disputed. One explanation asserts that Abu Kabsha was an ancestor of Muhammad from the tribe of Khuza. There you go again, the tribe of Khuza, Muhammad ibn Khuza, okay, who became infamous when he rejected his tribe's idolatrous religion. Thus, Muhammad's enemies called him Ibn Abi Kabsha because he too abandoned his tribe's religion. Let me just quickly go along. But okay, I again, this is just for me. I'm just pondering on this. Okay, this is like a white paper I'm putting out on this one here. It says here, this is
yeah,
from Photius. I will definitely provide you guys with the reference of this as well. This is Photius. Let me tell you where it's from. Actually, give me a second. It is. Uh, Photius Bibliotheca excerpts. Photius Bibliotheca excerpts, and I'll definitely get you all the information later on to put up on here. Okay, it says here, Cassius, Case, same individual, to whom Nunusus was sent, was a chief of two of the most illustrious Saracen tribes, the Khinda and the Ma'ad tribe. Okay, I know it says Kindani and Ma'adni, but it's basically the Khinda tribe and the Ma'ad tribe. Before Nunusus was appointed ambassador, his father had been sent to this same cases by Justinian and had concluded a treaty of peace on conditions that Cassius' son Muawiyah should be taken as a hostage to Byzantium. After this, Nunus was entrusted with a threefold mission to Cassius to induce him, if possible, to visit the emperor, to Elisabas, king of Axumites, and to the Amorites. And it continues. And then just a little bit further down on section 3, it says here, he relates that Cassius or Case, after Abraha had been sent to him a second time, sent out for Byzantium, having previously divided his chieftaincy between his brothers Amir and Yazid. He brought a large number of his subjects with him and was appointed administrator of Palestine by the emperor. So we understand that the case that's been mentioned earlier on, he has two brothers. One is called Amir, and the other one is called Yazid. And supposedly, he divided up his chieftaincy between these two brothers. So we would assume one would have had rulership over Ma'ad, the other one would have had rulership over Kinda. We find that, of course, Amir, who may, if this is all correct, this could be the original name of our Muhammad, okay? Amir. Whereas the other brother is called Yazid. And we find, curiously enough, within inside of the Abraha's inscriptions, we find this Yazid being mentioned. Okay. So here, Abraha has written his inscription after revolted and broke his oath. Yazid ibn Kabsha, his governor, whom he appointed over Kedat, which is Kinda, while this tribe had no governor. He rebelled, and with him so forth. So we see if these individuals are one and the same, right? Yazid, who Kay's split his chieftaincy Kinda to Yazid, okay, and Abraha actually gave him that governorship, but he rebelled. We see that his last name is called Kabsha. So therefore, I'm just wondering, could it be possible that Muhammad, also from Khuzar, was named Kabsha? and he was the son of the Ibn, sorry, the Ibn Kabsha, the father of Kabsha, Ibn Abi Kabsha. So
Interesting. Yeah. When I looked up the word capture, if I remember correctly, it 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 meant etymologically a sacrificed sheep.
yes, a
So
sheep.
I don't know if that's part of why it was viewed as a derogatory term for him. Um, but
I I think that I don't even think that it was even a derogatory term. I think that the scholars didn't understand this term, and they didn't understand this term. Like even with again when we have the term for Muhammad, Muhammad has a
yeah,
couple of names or terms that's been ascribed to
yeah,
him, but people don't understand it and they make stuff up around it. So, for example, he's been called Abul Qasim, um, and they didn't understand that, and they literally created a son called Qasim to make it sound like this is where his name comes from, him being the father of Qasim. But when we go into the
yes,
records, we find out this doesn't make any sense because
yeah,
supposedly this Qasim died before he even became a prophet.
yeah,
Before he even became a prophet, and you're telling me that years later people are calling him by this kunya doesn't make sense. We find in the Hadith
yeah,
literature yet again that this name Qasim is not because he's a father of Qasim. It says that because I am the Qasim. It's like, huh?
yes,
That don't make no
yeah,
sense
yeah,
then. So, and it's the same thing as this with Ibn Kabsha, or this title Ibn Kabsha, which will be the chief of, and I think personally, which I think it could possibly be to be the head or the chief of the pilgrims, because when we go into the chapter of the Quraysh, I don't know if you know the chapter of the Quraysh, 106.
I don't.
In
I'm
there,
actually
they
thinking,
have
uh, like literally, a bishop is in charge of a flock. So capture is a reference to sheep that fits in nicely.
that's right. And when you read chapter 106, and then you don't look at the word Quraysh meaning a what's man call it a tribe,
A tribe. Yeah.
and you read it as in the Sabaik language, Quraysh meaning a flock of sheep. Yet again, and I did a reconstruction of the chapter Quraysh, and I was like, hold on, this is literally from Psalms. Like the chapter, I think it's chapter 23 from Psalms. It's literally a a reformulation of that chapter to say that
Why?
I have no I walk in the shadow of death, I have no fear, my Lord lands sets me into green pastures, etc., and I will worship the Lord in his house, etc. It's like
Are
that
you
chapter
are you
was
to,
literally a
are you
play around
talking
with that.
about Surah 103 of the Quran called Quraysh?
Really?
Is that what you're referring? Or are
Yes,
you referring to a chapter in the Surah?
yes, the chapter of the Quran, I believe it's called I think it's chapter
Yeah.
106. I believe it's
You know
chapter
what?
106.
You know what's
Yeah.
really crazy is I literally have been working on a presentation that I'm going to be doing in London in a few days, and
Yeah.
in that I have references to the connection between that surah and various pilgrimage psalms. Exactly what you're saying. I don't think I had 23, but I had a number
Yeah.
of other pilgrimage ones, and I think you're on the right track there. Um, actually, one suggestion. I'm sorry, you don't want to be talking over you. One suggestion that a guy called the linguist has given for Quraysh is a reference to the temple, which you would have a pilgrimage to the temple in Jerusalem. But that's another level to this.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to you.
Yeah. I can't wait because we're gonna have some good discussions, and we'll be definitely bouncing ideas from each other. Because
Yeah,
once I listen, when I turn on your stuff, I learn a lot of information. I'm like, oh, cool, you just opened that up. I never thought about that before. So yeah, let's quickly go through. I think we're basically reaching to the end right now. And I really wanted to bring this up and kind of show you the
on.
map of what I call Abraha's Abyssinian Empire of Arabia. I believe the scholars they call it Arabia at the time of Abraha, but this was literally his empire When you see from all the way at the bottom, from Aden, all the way up to Jutham, which is basically where you have where the Ghassanids are to the top north, and then you have where the Sassanids, sorry, the Lachmids are. So those
Yeah.
territories are not his. And then a little bit over here, I don't know if you can see my thing, but literally
Yeah.
near Oman over here, he didn't have that conquered neither. That belonged also to the Sassanid Empire, but the whole of Arabia was basically his. We find this through his various inscriptions. And I thought to myself, you know, nobody's going to take me seriously because I'm just showing you the map. And, who am I? And even though this is coming from Christian Robbins' work, which is there, I'm like, okay, let me just get you another scholar for those people who are the naysayers. And this is literally a slide from George Hackte's work. And in here, it has, he basically, this is me just literally copying his slide. It says here, Abraham,
Yeah.
an Ethiopian king of Himyar, having defeated the rebels. Let me just, I have to bring this down a little bit. Having defeated rebels on the home front and consolidated his hold on Himyar, Abraha spent the 550s restoring Himyar's Arabian empire through a series of military campaigns. In so doing, he curbed the power of Ma'ad, a loose conglomerate of Arab tribes based in Central Asia. At its maximum extent, the empire created by Abraha extends as far north as the borderlands of the Romans and Sassanid empires and stretched from the Hijaz in the west to the Persian Gulf to the east, with only Oman remaining on the Sassanid rule. Most of Arabia was ruled by an Ethiopian Christian within a mere 2 decades of Muhammad's birth. Okay. And I think that is crucial to know the background and context of when the supposed time of when Muhammad existed would have been underneath an Ethiopian Abyssinian empire. And I'm like, why is nobody talking about this? That Arabia was fully Christianized during the time of when, this 632 period. It was Christianized already by Abraham.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
And
incredible.
wait,
Yeah.
let me just do a caveat. By Abraha, because within inside of Ethiopia, there are two powers. There are the power of the king and the power of the Abuna, which is the archbishop. Those two powers. And we can see in his inscriptions, he had completely conquered the whole of Arabia, and he introduced new formulaic inscriptions with a new form of Christianity that they said he brought to the Arabian Peninsula.
This is
And
this is a real eye opener, and there's a lot of new material. It's going to take me a while to take it all in, but um, I think this makes a lot of sense because one of the big issues that I had with the whole story was the idea of Muhammad being born in the year of the elephant and a reference to Abraha somehow fitting in with that, and it never worked on a timeline
yeah,
because Abraha clearly died before the birth of Muhammad, so it didn't quite fit. But if there was an
yeah,
earlier Muhammad, as you say, then it all starts to make sense, and then it's potentially this actual real life person is a good chunk of where the new Muhammad story comes from, um,
hundred
with a mixture of other
percent.
things as well. Because I
Yes,
do think it's like a carpet that's been weaved from lots of different strands of material, and it's all so mixed up together that it's almost impossible to decipher it. But you have to kind of go back, look at the history, and see with the individual strands to be able to see where it's come from, where it's going. Um, so this is incredible. I'm just curious about that map there. You have got two uh, what you call oval shapes. The bottom one would be the Abraha's original kingdom, and the other one is where he expanded into, I presume.
um,
Is that the idea?
basically, um, oh, that's a good way of looking at it. I just think that that's just where they've overlapped it. In his presentation, he has various different like oval shapes, kind of showing you in his inscription, he's talking about this area and then this area and this area. And then at the end,
Uh-huh.
he just gives you, basically this is everything. But yeah, in terms of where he did have his center, it would definitely be where the redder parts are in that map.
Yeah. Can you go back to the previous slide for a second? Just where you have the big map of Arabia. It was which I really liked. So you can see there the just above Mad you have Tay, which the tribe
Yes.
of Tay, which is the Tayaye, and
Tayaye, yes.
and there's a reference in the 7th century to Mahmud de Tayaye. So there's a connection there. There's something in that, you know. Um,
Definitely.
so I think this is an absolutely fascinating presentation, and it fills in a lot of the gaps. And one of the big questions that everyone has been wondering about is why is there Ethiopic words present in the Quran? It's now there's only a small sprinkling, but there's something in there, especially when you take into account all the references in the Sirah. There's something down south on top of the story that's happening up north as well. There's a bit of both. It's very hard
Definitely.
to bring it all together as a hypothesis, but it can't be ignored. Like,
Definitely.
uh,
And I love, I don't know if you've read Ahmed Jalad's, one of his new works to do with the Basmala. And in
is this a
there,
book or a paper?
it's a paper.
Paper.
It's a
I
paper.
haven't not recently. No, I've probably missed out on that.
Okay, do you know what? I'm going to let me try to share my screen for a few things.
Yeah,
Just because
you
we
might
have reached.
have to. You might need to unshare that one first. I'd say.
So let's stop sharing this. And
Yeah.
then we're going to share again. This time we are going to go here. So do you see that? Okay, on my channel, which is something I would definitely do want to go, a little bit deeper with you on another show if we do get the opportunity to, and hopefully
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
audience would request another one.
Yeah.
I
So if you
basically
if you want them back, you have to put a comment underneath.
definitely, yeah. Just drop a comment. And in fact, if you're
Yeah.
enjoying the show so far, please hit the like button. Hit the like button and
Exactly.
share this with one of your friends to let them know that this is a powerful show filled with new information that's never been seen before. All right.
Yeah.
So over here, I created a parallel list, and I think it's over. I think we've got over 25 here, roughly around 25 here, but there's about at least 30 in total. And I
Oh,
kind of show you parallels between, our Abyssinian Muhammad ibn Khuzai, and then the other Muhammad, which is the Prophet Muhammad of Islam. I didn't fill out this side because I think everybody knows this stuff in terms of,
yeah.
when I'm dealing with Muslims. So,
Yeah.
named Muhammad. Yep, they both named Muhammad. They had a title. They both had the title Abu Qasim. They were both associated with prophethood. They both had the title apostle. They both brought a new religion. They both received a holy book from God. They were both ordered to carry out religious propaganda in Mecca. They both legislated for the Arabs. They both engaged in religious debates, especially with Jews. They both persuaded Arabs to make Hajj to a Kaaba. They were both associated with erecting and consecrating places of worship. They were both cast out by their tribe. Um, they both made an expedition against Mecca. They both emigrated to Ethiopian territory. They both had a close relationship with an Ethiopian king. They both made military leaders. They both were descendants of Kinder or Quraysh. I don't know why that's not filled yet. They both reported to have been killed on the battlefield, and they're both said to have died shortly after the Ethiopian king's death. They both
Can
had
I
the
just
Ethiopian king's son Sarahil followed when he reigned. Yeah,
can I just challenge one point? Both reportedly killed in the battlefield. At least according to one report, Muhammad was poisoned by Aisha. Is there another
yeah,
account that he
yeah. So
was killed on battlefield?
there's another report inside of the Syria literature itself. There was where he was shot by an arrow, and
Okay.
the enemies thought they had killed Muhammad, but I believe they went around telling everybody that they had killed Muhammad, and then I think they found out that later on that it wasn't Muhammad who they had shot and killed.
Yeah. Yeah.
it should be here. I don't know why it's not here. Let me just quickly go on to the documentation, and I'll tell you the quotes from the Surah literature. Give me a second.
But to have this number of parallels is remarkable. I don't believe in coincidences. I think once you get over four or five coincidences, it's starting to look like there's
That's
something behind all of this.
that's what I say. I say basically, you have you have a incident, then you have that's one, then you have a coincidence, and then when you have three or more, that is now a pattern. So
Yes,
yeah, that's
that's a good way of
literally a
putting
pattern that is taking place.
it.
So that is on page 377 of Ibn Ishaq's work. I haven't updated that list, but yeah, it's on page 377, and I'll just read it out quickly for you.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Here it is. Musa ibn Umair fought in defense of the apostle until he was killed. The one who killed him was Ibn Kamia al-Laythi, who thought he was the apostle. So he returned to the Quraysh and said, I have killed Muhammad. When Musab was killed, the apostle gave the standard to Ali, and Ali and the Muslims fought on.
What's interesting there, there's a funny parallel between that and the story in the Quran of Jesus being killed or appearing to be killed, but actually wasn't killed.
Yes.
You know, so that's interesting. So yeah, I'm gonna. It's gonna take me a while to process all this new material. This is it's amazing. It just goes to show the level of complexity in terms of how these traditions came down. But how Ibn Ishaq or whoever it was that wrote the Sirah stitched all this material together and didn't kind of go, this sounds like a myth because I'm taking a little bit from here and a little bit from there. Um, I can't put that entirely down to just ignorance and stupidity. There has to be a certain level of intention to deceive, I think, at some point.
That's right.
No, actually,
That's right.
I,
So
I try
if
and
we do
avoid
another,
that conclusion, but it's very hard to avoid that conclusion when you see this level of evidence.
definitely, if we have a chance and we do another show, and we'll see when the uh, Syria literature was being constructed, and you'll see that there was the first Syria literature that was constructed or built or created. If you ever turn into the Syria literature that I just showed you, right at the beginning, that will give you the breakdowns of where it came from and who wrote the first one. The very first
Yeah.
one was written by Uthman's son Aban. Aban wrote the first one and gave it to the Umayyads, and especially Abdul Malik. And Abdul Malik said, "What?" After it was read to him, they were like, "No way, no way! I am not giving this to my Syrian soldiers. This is information they do not need to know." And it was a lot of information was about the Ansars and the Yemeni tribes. So this is the southern Arabians. So the
Yeah.
southern Arabians were held in very high esteem, but that information about them was burnt out of existence because they didn't want that information to be told. And you will see that from the southern Arabians and the northern Arabians, there are two different stories that's being told. So, for example, you find the North Arabians demonizing, for example, Abraha and the people that was with him. But the South
Yes.
Arabians, they hold him in high esteem. They call him Granddad Abraha, the greatest king to ever live. He surpassed every immortal creature. It's like, huh?
Yes.
You're even bragging about him to the extent that you're saying he's even higher than Muhammad himself. So
Yeah.
in there,
Yeah.
there is two stories, two narratives there's two narratives about this individual, and you have to realize that a lot of politics went into it. So, for example, you have the
Yes.
Umayyads,
Yeah.
and then before the Umayyads, there was the Zubairids, and they were the counter caliphate, and they were the
Yeah.
first ones to actually introduce the stories of Muhammad in terms of what we've got. So, if you
Yeah.
know about Urwa ibn Zubair, his brother Abdullah ibn Zubair, there was a counter caliphate during the time of the Umayyads, and they ruled a lot. And then obviously Abdul Malik came in and supposedly destroyed Mecca, destroyed the Kaaba. And inside the Kaaba, they had an image of Jesus and Mary. That was the only image inside of the Kaaba. So it's like they must have had a different form of Islam that was more
Yes.
in line with Christianity. Because
Yeah.
imagine today if that imagery of Jesus and Mary, the only image that all the Muslims are bowing down to, the billions of Muslims bowing down to 5 times a day, there is actually an image of Mary and Jesus in there. That would have been a completely different religion than what we know
Yeah.
of Islam today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thought that occurred to me is when we use the word Arabs today, we think of one unified people, one ethnicity. They're all united around one language. But at that time, the people were just tribal. They were just in their own tribe. They were not. They didn't see themselves first as Arabs. They were Arabs uh, in the second sense, but in the first sense, they belonged to a particular tribe. And so there was no sense of overall unity. That came through the development of things like these conquests and also by Islam as a religion later. And maybe that's partially the purpose of having a religion like Islam. It helps to bind the people together. But yeah, there's an awful lot here to reflect on. It's
Definitely.
really good.
And I
So
just
we'll
want
have
to
to
give you
rate.
the last, one of the last things I would like to give to you is definitely,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's on the screen right now. In green, this is
No,
Ahmed Jalad's. No?
no.
Let's
You
see
might
if
have
I
to
can.
unshare to. I see a green section. Is that the one you're looking at?
Yeah.
Okay.
The interaction between North and South Arabia was no
Yeah.
doubt
See it.
intensified by the Himyarite Empire's expansion into the Arabia Deserta and would have reached a climax following Abraha's exertion as far north as Tabuk in the 6th century. These would have brought both regions under a single political umbrella and would have led to new dynamics between different regional confession groups. It is possible that the bipartite Basmala traces its origins back to this period and originally functioned as an expression of confessional unity among North and South Arabian monotheists, declaring in the name of Allah, who is the Rahman. This is synchronization. This synchronization is perhaps foreshadowing in our readings of CI
Yes. Yeah.
543 about, and then it goes on to talk about the political motivation. And it says here that in the mid 6th century, between the year 535 and 555, South Arabia was ruled by a vice regent of Aksum, Abraha. He expanded the political borders of ancient Himyar considerably with military excursion, reaching far into North Arabia. While in the earliest periods, Himyar's religion reflected Aksumite Christian dogma, later inscriptions appear to show a used terms for Christ, such as Messiah, rather than the Son, perhaps reflecting a similar spirit. The Basmala emerged as a compromise. Both South and North Arabian terms are treated as equals and would have been regarded as acceptable in the cosmopolitan landscape created by Abraha's expansion. So, yeah, in there we see that basically there is previous inscriptions that Muslims, before they even, when you open the Quran, before you even utter a prayer, you say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And Ahmed Jalad as well as Manfred Kropp has kind of showed that this this basmala actually originated during late Sabbaic times, during the time of our Muhammad, the Abyssinian Muhammad, and Abraha. And it was initially, bipartite, linking Allah to say he is the Rahman. But then it was later expanded into Al Rahim, which is basically, when you go into the Ge'ez language, you realize that it is basically a calque of Rahman, the merciful and the most gracious. So they find it in its precedence within inside of the Ge'ez language itself. And we see that it was the combination of bringing the North Arabian tribes and the South Arabian tribes under one political unified form. And we see also that Abraha didn't do like the other kings of Ethiopia did by writing in Ge'ez. All of his proclamations, all of his inscriptions was done in the Arabic language. And we can see that also within inside of the Quran. If the Quran does go back to the time of Abraha and our Abyssinian Muhammad, we see that it is literally following along his domestic and religious policy of doing things within the side of the Arabic language. And I'm always thinking to myself, why is nobody making this connection with Abraha and this Muhammad when you find the oldest manuscript of the Quran? We don't find it, some people like Shoemaker want to place it in the north. No, we don't find it in the north. We find it in Sana'a. We find it in
Yes.
the capital of Abraha's
Yeah.
city, within inside of Abraha's church that was converted into a mosque. Why are we finding these literature, which I say is clearly late antiquity Christian literature? Why are we finding it there? And we're not putting two and two together to think this is Christian literature that was created in the 6th century, and we're now, transposing it into the 7th century underneath this random illiterate
Yes.
Muhammad. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's really brilliant. And the thing is, you actually in the Sana manuscript, you see that there was editing done on it. So they have the palimpsest, or I never can pronounce the word, but
yeah,
which shows a different version of it, and then on top they've written a new version. So that seems to be the center of where they're doing all the editing of this manuscript, and then
that's right.
it's copied out. I can't imagine there's the new edition is happening somewhere else, and then they're editing it down at Sana. It makes more sense that they're actually editing there. At least that's the simplest explanation.
That is.
This is absolutely blowing stuff. I'll have
Yeah.
to I'll have to go back, change all my earlier material, and say, well, I'll have to acknowledge there was someone called Muhammad in the 6th century. Um, one of the ways in which I'm more open or receptive to what you're saying is I was looking at some inscriptions from the 3rd to the 4th century, and I think they're in the south, if I remember. I think they were in the south, where you have references to variations of Muhammad. And so
Okay.
there's a tradition of people being called that name, even going back to the 3rd and 4th century.
Ye-
And so that makes sense then for the vocalization of Muhammad to appear later in the in inscriptions and text later. I think there's also the issue that um, parallel to all of this, you have this person with a name called Muhammad, but then you also have a title of Mahmed that's appearing in Jewish sources, and on Christian coins you have Mahmed with a cross from the 660s. So
I
that's
personally
that's the
believe,
other thing there. Hmm.
I'm going to say this, right? I
Yeah,
think that when we're reading these so-called Jewish inscriptions um, in South Arabia,
yeah,
that Mahmed that's being referred to, I actually think we're talking about the Messiah or the Christ. Okay, I think that is it. That is because Christian Julian Robin as well. He speaks about this because
yeah,
this Mahmed that's being referred to is with God. This
yes,
is a theophor. It's a theonym, meaning it's a name of God, but it's saying with
yes,
God is the praised one.
yes,
He,
yeah,
he makes mention that this is kind of like similar to the two powers within inside of Jewish literature. And based
yes,
upon your
yeah,
stuff, when I listen to your stuff, I'm like, but why can't it be the Messiah, like Jesus himself? Like that is the second
yeah,
power that they're talking about.
yes,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and then when we go back into the early tafsir writings, we see that they introduced this term Mahmed, or they call it the Mahmud in terms of the elephant. And
yeah,
it's like, they don't even make mention of names of certain individuals like kings, but they definitely want to highlight this point that this elephant was called Mahmud. And they do a
yes,
very curious story in there, and I think it's an allegorical story to say that they took him, facing north. He wouldn't go. Sorry, he went north. He would go north, south. And I was seeing it like this: you're doing this, and he bowed. I was like, hold on, you're telling me that just to me, you're doing the sign of the cross, and then he bowed, because he didn't want to go into Mecca. I was like, this sounds like that. It says as well that the elephant, it was sacrificed. It was, hooks and stuff. He was beaten. He was thrashed. He was, like all these things to say like the gruesomeness, but he never died. They sacrificed him, but he never died, and it bowed itself and didn't attack Mecca.
Yeah,
I was like, hold on, this just sounds like you're giving me a story, an allegorical story about
yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Well, it's
And
kind
then
of like,
also we find later on that, sorry, let me just say, the Ethiopians, they brought in this elephant as an object of worship within one of the tafsirs. It's like, huh? Abyssinians or Ethiopians never worshipped an elephant. They always worshipped, they were Christians. So
yeah,
cannot this elephant be an allegory for Jesus Christ? And I think it makes more sense if it's an allegory for Jesus Christ, and the term Mahmed is just another word for Jesus Christ. And we see within
yeah,
inside of the naming culture, within inside of the Ethiopians, so it appears as though they give themselves certain names that are titles of God. So, for example, Abraha, meaning light giver or light bearer, is a
yeah.
title that was given to God. And
Yes,
Muhammad, which is the praised one, is another title given to God. We see that also, the so-called fake prophet during the Ridda Wars was also called El Rahman. So we see that these South Arabians were giving themselves titles that technically belong to God. Is it
yes,
possible
yeah,
that this name Muhammad is actually a title of God, who is Jesus Christ? But that's just me doing
yes,
my,
yeah,
hypothesis. I'm just hypothesizing. I'm not saying anything to be
yeah,
certain. Yeah, I'm just saying it could be possible.
yeah. I do think Mahmed is particularly when it appears in the Quran is a title for Jesus, especially when you look at it in context.
100%.
There was something else. Yeah, when you're talking about the elephant being used in an allegorical sense, the parallel there would be the legend of Saint George killing a dragon, and in
Mm,
that story, the dragon is the Roman Empire, the evil Roman Empire that he conquers through his martyrdom.
yeah.
So there is definitely a case to be made for it being allegorical, and of course, elephants is used to refer to the actual elephants that the Seleucids used when they were attacking Jerusalem as well. But it's unusual for them to use that as an allegory for Jesus. That's an unusual choice, but there we go.
Yeah.
Um, so I think Callum, you will definitely have to come back because there's a lot more in this story, and we definitely need to dig deeper on
Definitely.
this one. So
I think
have to hand it to
one
you.
I would love to do, the next one I would love to do is proving that the Negus within inside of the Islamic records is, this is a controversial one, is actually talking about Abraha. And this is how
Right.
I've tied it together to know that definitely, like, it's just a retelling of the older Muhammad story within inside of the Islamic records.
Oh, that sounds excellent. So Callum, listen, thank you so much for coming along, and big shout out to Titans TV's community, who I'm sure will be watching. So it's great to have you on, and let's do this again in the not too distant future.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Mel, for having me on. It's been a pleasure. It's a long time coming, and I'm so grateful that I was able to present this information on your channel to your community. Because there's one thing I absolutely love your community. When I see the comments within inside of the comment section, I can see every single person. The majority of the people in there are very astute individuals. They're doing the research. They're very much so
Yeah,
interested, in the historical aspect of it. They're not coming there, you know, technically for the apologetic side of things. They're there for the historical information, the gems
yeah,
that you drop like constantly. Literally, the videos is one thing. Then when you got the posts, your post every single
oh
day, it
yeah,
feels like you're dropping posts that's just stimulating
yeah, yeah.
like thought. So I just want to
Things
say,
are
like, keep
zinging.
on doing what you're doing. You're doing an absolutely
Yeah.
great job.
Oh,
And
thank
I'm
you.
I'm like, listen, you're inspiring me. I've actually created a website. It's called Abyssinian Islam. It hasn't gone properly live yet, but it will do.
Oh,
I'm just waiting to finish off a few articles. Then I'm
oh,
going to
that's
be
so
publishing
brilliant.
my information on there as well.
Brilliant.
So thank you so much for
Well,
inspiring me and
not
just
so.
spreading the information.
Yeah. Well, when you finish that website, do share the link so we can publicize it for people, because I'm sure there will a lot of people who want to read the material and see what you've brought together. So thanks a million, Callum, and we'll
Thank
see you
you.
very soon.
All right.